Okay. Hi, Lindy. Lindy
Hey,
Johnson is here
Crystal.
with me today. She's also one of our moderators here for the in the Mormon Enlightenment Facebook group. And she has done a lot for us over the years. It's been a while since you and I have talked, but we've been able to get together in person. And I think once 2020 hit, that's kind of when we all kind of started hibernating, and we haven't been real social since then, but we have seen each other a few times since COVID hit. So it's been nice, but I'm excited to have you on because you and I have had multiple conversations about our transition out of Mormonism. We even had you on the Mormon Enlightenment podcast and YouTube channel like 3 years ago.
Yeah,
You
smile.
Yeah, and so that was great to hear your story leaving Mormonism. But now we're going to talk about your your experience since then, because we talked about all that and how it kind of unfolded. But now, since it's been a few years, that's why I really wanted to do these so that we can offer that advice and encouragement for those who are still fresh out and dealing with the hardest parts of this transition. So I wanted to be able to help people who are feeling lonely and are dealing with the family relationships, are feeling isolated, feeling judged and condemned and all of that stuff, so that we can talk about some of those experiences that you had and how you've gotten to a better place emotionally now, since it's been almost 5 years for you, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So
Yeah, we were just talking about that. I was like doing the math. I'm like, oh my gosh, yeah, it's going to be this summer. It'll be about 5 years since I
yeah,
started down the rabbit hole. So,
yeah. So
what,
tell me what it was like the first couple of years. Tell me like the timeline of after you left. What was your biggest struggles, and how did you get to work through those different things?
so I think, and I think a lot of people will relate to this, but I feel like the biggest struggles was just, trying to redefine the framework that I wanted for my life, what I wanted my marriage to look like, what I wanted my family to look like. How do I, maintain, not just relationships, but positive relationships with, family and, even some friends that, are still, choosing to be in the church and, trying to navigate all of that stuff. And, the choices, being comfortable with the choices that I'm making and letting go of caring about what other people are going to think about those choices. Like, I think a lot of people, when they leave the church, like the questions of, am I going to drink alcohol? Am I going to start drinking coffee? Do I get tattoos, piercings? What's my mom going to think? Like, so just all of those, going through all of those, you know, things over the last several years, it's just kind of, it seems like a lot to go through. And it's just this constant, like, I don't know if battle is the right word, but we're just going to go with battle for lack of a better word. But
Totally. I agree. Like that, it is like still having this tinge of guilt, for a long time for me. I don't know if it was like that for you, but with drinking alcohol, I just always felt, I was having fun, but I always felt like, does this make me bad? Does this make me trashy? I had these judgments in the back of my head always. And, I could never really feel, I don't know, I just couldn't feel okay with it. I always had the guilt still. And I don't know
yeah,
why it lasted
and,
for so
and
long.
and on top of the guilt too, because, and I know not every single, Mormon or true believing Mormon is the same. I know that there are great non-judgmental people within the church, but coming from that place, I feel like I generally knew how people think. And so when they see someone drinking alcohol, or they see someone with tattoos, or they see someone, wearing something that they consider not modest, like I know
Mhm.
process that, and like they assume, and they, like wearing an outfit with my shoulders showing, that tagline, like you send a message with what you're wearing on your body. Like that has probably been the biggest thing for me to shed, is to be
Really?
comfortable, like showing my shoulder,
Wearing
wearing a crop.
around family members, or just even out and about since you live in Utah?
Um, at first out and about, like
Mhm.
I would be totally fine going on vacation, like out of
Yeah.
state, wearing that stuff. Crop tops and, spaghetti, not, well, tank tops, whatever. But I've gotten to a place where I'm like, yeah, I'm okay wearing a tank top, or, I don't wear booty shorts because I just, that's just not my style. But,
Mhm.
shorts that are way above the knee, and I'm
Yeah.
comfortable up around not only my family, but my in-laws too, because, I feel like I have a lot more care about what my in-laws think about me than I do about my own family. Cause, my kind of has to accept me no matter what. But my in-laws, anyway, that's just my
Totally. I
take.
remember my first time going to the grocery store wearing shorts that were not even that short. They were like to here.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my gosh, like who's gonna see me? And I was so nervous. I don't know
Yeah.
why. It's funny. Like it wasn't revealing much at all, but I was just so nervous that people were gonna look at me and be like, she's not wearing her garments. Why is she not wearing her garments?
Yeah. Like, yeah, being able to like let go of that stuff and just, I actually, because of having this call with you today, Mike and I were kind of talking about like, the purpose of the call. And we were just like, we generally will go through most of our days without thinking about the church. We don't think about what's going on. Like we'll hear like through the grapevine some
Yeah.
random thing that happened, and we're like, oh, that's great. Like this past October rolled around. I didn't even know it was General Conference until like 2 weeks later.
Same here. Yes. I mean, like that's such a good realization that we have begun to really move on, because I was keeping up with everything about the church. I was always in the Mormon Enlightenment group, like wanting to fuel that fire and just like almost like wanting to get angry.
Yeah.
And but now it is nice to see where I've grown, and you as well, that we don't need to concern ourselves so much with what's going on in the church. We've been able to move on, and not judging people who are in that space. I think it's a natural process that in the beginning it's like our way of processing it. We have to go through that angry stage. But I think as we do these calls, one of the pieces of advice I think many of us are going to be offering is that just don't stay in that space too long. But don't judge yourself for being there, because we're all going to go through that. We have to go through the angry stage, and we have to go through the sad part, and the grief and all of that. So
Yeah. I went to like a faith crisis workshop towards the beginning of my transition. And that was one of the things that they talked about, is when you are transitioning out of the church, you really need to let yourself go through the 7 stages of grieving. Like you have to, the denial, the anger, the bargaining, and then, eventually you get to the acceptance. And, so yeah, it's okay to spend time in each of those stages. And sometimes it's even okay to go back a little bit too, like, because
totally.
I'm still human. Like, yes, I don't think about the church very often, but there was a very not nice talk that was given at BYU by Elder Holland not that long ago, and that flippin' triggered me for like a week. I was up in ends about it. But other than like random things like that, like my husband Mike and I, we are so happy with our lives and where we're at. And so I'm just grateful to have gone through that like molding experience and come out it on the other side, like just like truly happy with who I am and where I'm at, and being able to be authentic
Yeah.
with.
And not worrying so much about what other people are thinking, because I think that's what consumed me a lot, like constantly feeling judged. But it was all in my head. I know there are people who judge, but I think I made it more than it was. I thought people were thinking of me more than they were,
Oh, totally.
and concerned with my choices.
Oh,
And yeah,
yeah.
but I'm like, I don't think people are thinking about me as much as I thought they were.
Yeah. Isn't that funny? like we're always in our own heads about what other people are thinking, but it's like really everyone's in their own heads about themselves, and they
Their own
really don't
life.
care about you.
Yeah, I know. Like, okay, you left the church. We don't care. But it's just the judgment that we know that we once placed on other people. But of course, even those times where we as Mormons were judging others for their life choices, it wasn't consuming us. Maybe we'd say a few words about a person and, be judgmental that way, but we weren't consumed with what that other person was doing. We have our own things that we're trying to work through.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, how has it been well, I want to ask you, what is it now that you believe in as far as like, I think that was probably my most recent realization, because I felt like I was just all over the place for so long as far as like not knowing what to believe in, and also trying to be okay with not having answers and not needing something to believe in, because it just felt like, is that possible? Like, can I just live my life and not have something to believe in? But it just felt really challenging. And I don't know if that's like the human condition or if that's my Mormon mentality that I need something. But how has that been as far as like feeling like you understand the purpose of life and, your life has meaning? Like, what does that look like for you now?
So what a loaded question. That's
I
great.
know.
There was a meme that I saw like shortly after we had decided to leave the church that said something to the effect of, once you realize the one true church is bullshit, you can be done with religion altogether.
Yeah.
And I kind of was just like, yeah, that's it. Like, I'm done. Like, I don't really believe in anything. Like, and then just like kind of the longer I was out, you kind of process things and you're just, I don't know, for me, I'm kind of at this place where I'm not an atheist. So I believe that there's some kind of a cosmic higher power, something that balances and centers the universe and, is responsible for our interactions with humanity. And, I don't want to discount some of the experiences that I've had in my life where I just feel like, wow, that was just like absolutely fantastic. And if it happened any other way, then this wouldn't have happened. And, whether or not I chalk that up to, the cosmos intervening in my life, I don't know, but I'm okay with, at this point, not spending exorbitant amounts of my time trying to figure out what that is. I really love the idea of, I don't know if like reincarnation is the right word, or the right idea behind, what I would like to think. But I think it'd be super cool to just like have another chance to live another life after this one, whether that's like here on earth or somewhere else, like who knows. But yeah, it's a big mystery for me. And I think I'm okay with not knowing and not having answers. But the hard part about that is with my kids when they ask me the questions, and I want to have these solid, concrete, like reaffirming answers for them that just gives them comfort. Like actually last night I was putting my middle boy Ethan to bed, and he's 6, he's in kindergarten, and I was just like hugging him so tight, and I just told him, I said, Ethan, I wish you could stay my little boy forever. And he was like, I wish you would never die. And I was just like, oh my gosh, like, I wish that too. Like,
yes.
I don't take away from you, but I didn't have a comforting answer for him. And I feel like there is also strength in telling your kids, I don't know. I don't have an answer. Like, I
agree. Yeah.
So
totally. It's a hard thing to say for your kids, because I think also part of the conditioning, I think for many of us growing up, was that we did have the answers. And so I think unintentionally, we do place our parents on these pedestals, which I no longer feel like my kids should see me that way, because I feel like then they have such they feel like they have to be like me, or I'll be disappointed if they aren't a certain way. So I like the idea of removing everybody from pedestals, even parents from their children. Like, I want my kids to know that I respect them so much and that I can learn so much from them as well. And there's no, just because I'm older, of course I do have more experience, but I still think that I want them to feel like they have this inner knowing. They don't need to always seek answers outside of themselves or seek answers from us. And so I think that's an invaluable lesson that we can give our children by simply saying, I don't know, and giving them the chance. It puts it back on them. Like, maybe they can think about it a little bit more and come up with their own idea of what the answer might be, and just let that be their own answer. And I think that can be a gift that we can give our children, to know that we can all have different definitions, different answers for all of these questions, and that's okay. That's been a hard thing for me to wrap my mind around. I'm like, no, there has to be one truth. There has to be one answer to life, But that's a Mormon mindset, or even maybe just an old mindset from generations and generations of thinking that we have found the answers.
Yeah, or truth is the one truth. And, there's many truths. There's many, many walks of life and experiences. I mean, how many different religions are out there? And I'm sure that every person who is convicted in their religion feels just as right as we once did. And it's not, it's not my place to tell any one person that what they, believe is or isn't correct. Or it doesn't work for them. Like, I have family that is still very invested in the church, and, it doesn't work for me. And, because of the transition that I had and the information that I went through, but it works for them. And so I can respect that their answers work for them, even though it doesn't work for me. And that goes for, anybody who's in any religion, not just Mormonism.
Yeah. And that is the hard part, because I feel that's been a hard thing for me, is to respect other people's beliefs, even without expecting them to respect my beliefs, because they probably most likely won't respect my beliefs and don't agree and won't, and still in their mind thinking that they're right and I'm wrong. But to me, I guess I'm also thinking they're wrong only for thinking that they are the only ones that have the truth. Like, they can follow that, in my opinion. I'm like, I will totally respect, if that works for you, but just please stop saying that it is the one and only truth.
Yeah.
Because if we could all be of that mindset, then I think we could have more tolerance. Like, oh yeah, like Buddhism works for you, that's great, and Mormonism works for you, that's great. But it's like, just remove the part where you say you have the truth and that you're always trying to convert others of that truth as well. And you think that you have this duty to fulfill to convert everybody in the world and to baptize everybody. And, that's where it gets challenging to respect other people's beliefs, knowing that they're not going to respect yours.
Yeah. So. Yeah. I actually was just talking with a really close friend about something kind of similar to that a few days ago. And she was expressing to me that they have like a family, like text chat group, and that there will be constant, messages coming through about church stuff, which is great. But then the things that bothers this friend of mine is that the comments that go with it is like, I wish everyone believed this way. And I wish everyone could just know the truth that we know. And it's just, And it's hard because I feel like there's this like unspoken duty that is placed upon your shoulders when you leave the church, that you don't show people the information. You don't show them the man behind the curtain. Because you don't tell them to stop believing in Santa. And if you do, you're just this evil, angry person that is, trying to shatter people. Like, you don't do that. But at the same time, those same people are not respectful of your boundaries and not wanting. So that all on its own has been a really hard thing since leaving the church, is, just having to have this constant understanding that I will always have to take the high road when it comes to that. And I'm going to have to let it roll off my shoulders and not let it bother me, because it's never going to stop. Like, that's how it is once you leave the church. And if you have family and friends that are still in.
Mm-hmm. So what kinds of things do you do? Like when something like that happens and you feel triggered, do you have ways of coming out of that? When, even with that talk that that was given at BYU, have you found anything in particular that helps you kind of rise above it? Or is it just time? Like, how do you work through that?
So, well, with the Elder Holland talk, that I feel like was, I don't know if that was like a unique situation, because I'm sure something like that's going to come up again. But for that one, for me, I took action. So I bought a pride flag and I staked it in my front yard. I bought some like pride earrings to wear around. I re-signed up to have Project Rainbow come and put a flag in my front yard for Pride Month in Utah, and, talked about it with friends and just, processed it out loud and just, reiterate. And, and I did do a Facebook post and just said, like, this is not okay. Like, your own personal beliefs do not give you a right to damage other people. And that's where I draw the line. If you want to believe what you want to believe, go for it. But you don't need to hurt other people in the process. So that, for me, I feel like I kind of took action, and then just time to kind of just let the dust settle a little bit and move on. But with little things on the daily, I kind of just have to have this mentality of just kind of roll my eyes and just like, okay. Or if it's like a talk that's shared in our family text group, I just don't even read it anymore. I just, I used to for sharing, and, because I didn't want anyone to think I was angry, but, I think it's okay to set boundaries and just not even respond to it. It's okay. You don't have to pretend to be okay with something that you're not to appease other people.
Totally. And even to the extent of removing yourself from the group if you feel that's what you want to do. And that's actually what I did with Sean's for Sean's family, because I just didn't, it wasn't necessarily church stuff, but it was just a vibe that I didn't appreciate. So I just removed myself from the group. And I know that people might judge that, but I'm just like, I feel better not having to get those text messages constantly. So yeah, they might judge me as being angry or got, offended, or my feelings hurt or whatever. But I know that for me and my peace of mind, I'm better off not receiving the text messages. I don't want to really be part of that group. And so that's my choice, but I know that doesn't have to be, you don't have to set a boundary like that. A boundary can be, it can show up in all different ways. So it's just, you have to decide, is this something that is making me feel triggered on the daily, or can I handle it? You have to know your limits. And that's where I had to get clear on my limits and know that, yeah, maybe it's, coming from an emotional reaction, but I have to honor the emotions that I'm experiencing at this time in my life, or the phase that I'm in. And when I'm ready, maybe I'll join it again. But that's where I think it can be challenging, because we go through the different emotions. But of course, I think many of us are learning through meditation. I know a lot of people have turned to meditation as their like spiritual practice. And through meditation, we learn how to pause before we react with whatever emotion that we're feeling. And that's where it can get really challenging, because we want to respond, but also, like, I think you can respond in a proactive and effective way, like you did. You did something that's more proactive and not tearing down. You're building up and supporting the LGBTQ community and voicing your opinion. You're speaking up, but then you're letting it go. And that's why I felt like with, Sean and I together in the beginning, we did our part to speak up, but then over time we realized we're done. Like, we did our part, now we pass the baton, and everybody's going to continue speaking up. So even though we're not as active in speaking out anymore as we were the first year, I still think it's an essential part of all of us transitioning out. I think it helps a lot of people, and to speak up. I don't think that we should walk away silently, even though now Sean and I are not speaking out anymore, but we felt like we did our part. and now we move on. Because if you stay in that space, I think that's where it can eventually, you won't really get to enjoy the freedom that you have now being out of the church, because you're just still wrapped up in all of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's also important to understand that, like with boundaries are for you to be okay, not to make other people okay with your boundaries.
Yeah.
So there's going to be, for people who are just fresh out leaving the church, like I've heard some very super sad, like hostile situations, marriages break up, parents disown their kids, siblings stop talking to you, your children don't want anything. Like there's lots of that happens when you leave the church. And when you choose to set a boundary for your own mental health, people are not going to be okay with your boundaries, and that's okay. It's okay for them to not be okay with it. And it's not your job to make them okay with your boundaries. Your job is to be okay with your boundary. And that's it. End of story.
Totally. I didn't even feel a need to explain, because I knew they wouldn't understand anyway. So, and I knew that I wasn't doing it from a place of getting back at them or trying to show them, prove a point, like I was just literally protecting my mental well-being.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that's the point of a boundary. It's not to be malicious or to hurt feelings. It's to, protect your own mental health. If, turning off notifications in a specific text group or Facebook group, or, not going to family dinners for a while, or not talking to a specific group of friends is what's going to help your mental health and get you to a happier, healthier place for a while, it's okay to step out for a minute. Totally. It's not to say you won't come back, but you need to learn to take care of yourself before you can worry about taking care of other people's feelings.
Yeah. And another thing that we did was we told Sean's parents before we go to the family dinners that we're going to show up a little bit late so that you guys can have your Mormon prayer. And we did it respectfully, like just letting them know, go ahead and have your prayer, because that's a boundary that we're setting. We don't want to be there for the prayer. We don't want our kids to be there for the prayer, because we know what's said in the prayer about, the prophets, and we're so grateful for the prophet and all of that stuff that we no longer believe. And so we didn't want to add any confusion for our kids during that time. I felt like we needed time for our kids to make sense of things, because I don't think of being around a prayer anymore would be that bothersome. We still, it's still that way where we just come late, we don't have to hear it, but it wouldn't be as triggering now as it was in the beginning. And I'm not so much worried about my own kids being around it or being exposed to it, because we have had 3 years to 4 years now to work through and to teach our kids and to deconstruct all of it with our kids, because, our oldest was 12 when we left. So she was just barely getting into young women's. And so it's just like, we had a lot that we needed to explain. Yeah. Because we had indoctrinated her for 12 years. And so we're like, now we're going to like renege on all that and be like, never mind, forget all that.
Remember all that stuff we told you for the last 12 years? Forget that.
Forget it out. That's not true. Yeah. So now it's interesting, because I would have never thought that we would ever consider letting our kids participate in any of the church activities. And I was always kind of angry when people would say, yeah, we still let our kids go. And because to me, I was like, how could you do that? Like you're going to let your kids go and be indoctrinated. But now I'm in a different space where I'm like, well, I don't let them go to church, nor would they even want to. They've never asked to go to church. But we've let them go to some church activities, and that first year, we're like, no way, they're going to say a prayer and they're going to mention something about the church. So we can't let our kids hear that at all. And so we were just highly sensitive. And now we're just like, okay, we've had that time to talk to our kids, to explain to them. They totally understand where we're coming from. They understand the history of the church. They understand the beliefs and the doctrine from the outsider's perspective, not growing up in it. So we feel now that we can allow our kids to participate in some of these things. Even girls camp, my daughter went to girls camp this last summer,
Oh,
but
cool.
we just feel like we have a great relationship with her, and we've communicated enough with her at this point that now we can let them, go and make their own choices. But it felt really scary at first for us, because we're like, they're going to take our kids from us, they're going to turn our kids against us. So that was like the biggest fear that we had in the beginning. That's why we were like, absolutely nothing
Yeah.
to do with the church. Our kids are not allowed. And they would ask if they could go, and because they missed their friends. And at first it was really hard because they felt like the outsiders, but now it's just such a normal thing that they're comfortable with where we're at. They don't feel like they're missing out on anything. So I think we just needed those years to feel comfortable and to explain and to make sure that we had the good communication around all of that. So it is interesting how we've kind of changed in that area, because I never would have thought we would have let our kids participate in even just the activities.
Yeah, that's so great. And I'm honestly like really happy that you guys are in that headspace. Because like not having to stress about that is like, it's probably relieving. Like, if Lily says, "Hey, I want to go to this activity," you don't have to be like, "Ah, Sean, what are we gonna
Yeah,
do?"
I know.
Um,
And
Mike and I are kind of in a little bit of a different spot than that. And that's probably just because our kids are so much littler. Like my
yeah,
oldest is,
yeah,
and so I like, for me, we really haven't had enough time with our kids with them having like mature brains to be able to have conversations with them like that.
yeah,
So that of like sending them to, sending Brinley to like, is it activity days? Is that what they
yeah.
do? Before
Uh-huh.
well, like that scares me. Like I would not want to do that because I'm not there. And I've heard so many stories of, leaders promising, exmo parents that, "Oh, we don't talk about anything to do with the church. It's just a fun activity." And then that trust is broken the first time that they send their kid. And
Yeah.
so for us, we're just not quite at that space where, I'm probably more where you guys were a few years ago, where we're just like,
Yeah,
nope,
and I totally respect that,
we're
because
not there.
I would never even suggest that anybody do that. It's not like I'm saying you guys should let your kids, because
Oh, yeah.
the only reason why we have is because certain friends are going when my
Sure.
kids are like, oh, they're going to what's activity days? Oh, they get to go make cookies. Can I go make
Yeah.
cookies? And I'm just like, okay, you can go, but it's only because they feel like they're missing out on a fun activity that their friend is going to.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with anything else. And
Yeah.
it is hard as a parent being in Utah, and all of the friends are in the church, and they all have different things that are church related, that our kids are the only ones that are not going. So it's
Yeah.
been hard to find a good balance, but it's only been a few things that we've let our kids go to, and it's only been recently, and it's still not, we're not 100% comfortable with it, but it's more like we're giving into our kids wanting to be part of something,
Yeah.
and they're just doing an activity. And we've talked so much about the church, like they're so sick of it. Like at one point we had to tell, like one of my daughters, she's 10 now, but she was 8, she was almost 8 when we left. And so she we just talked about it so much, like it was just always on our mind. Me and Sean, and the kids are around, and we're just like talking back and forth about everything church related, Mormon church related. And after a while, I think she got sick of it, and she's like, "Can we stop talking about Mormon stuff now?" And we're like, "Okay, yeah, you're right. Like we have been hashing this out for far too long." So now every time she says that, every time we feel like we want to talk about church stuff, we're like, palm trees. Like that's because that's what she would always do. She'd try to like change the subject. She's like, "Oh, look at those trees." So we're like, okay, now when we know we are taking it too far, we're like, "Oh, look at the palm trees." Because it's like, yeah, let's change the subject. We don't need to talk about this all over again. But we did it for like 2 years straight.
But I think the takeaway from that is like I think every family and every child is going to be different. I think that there's, going to be parents are like, absolutely no way, you're not involved in anything. And there's going to be parents that are like, sure, you can go. And I think that's the great part of like leaving, is you can make that choice for yourself. And there's, I I think within reason that there's no right or wrong answer. As long as you're making sure that your kids are safe and they're taken care of, it's
Mhm.
really just your discretion. And that's what I love about, having the freedom to choose.
Yeah. And I think also the age is a big, thing
Yeah.
to consider, like you said. And we, so my oldest now, she's 16. It's because we've had enough conversations with her that we know where she's coming from, that we know that she'll go into, if she does have to hear a prayer or anything, she has an open mind, and she knows so much now. And just by having the conversations that we've had, we know that she understands what we're trying to explain to her, because it took her, she hated us for like that first year. She thought we were crazy. She was so mad at us because she just went into Young Women's. She went to her first girls camp, and right when she came home, we're like, sorry, Lily, you're never going back. She's like,
And she's like, what
are you talking about? My parents are crazy. Yeah. She's like, I can't even go to church. I can't go to the activities, like nothing. And so she hated us for that first year. And so there was no way at that time we were going to let her go, because it would only like reinforce her judgment on us, because she was already mad at us for leaving the church. So we needed to have that time to where we felt like she understands. And it's taken many years for her to finally get it. And based on just things that she says, we know that she gets it. She'll be like, oh my gosh, my friend had to go talk to the bishop, because of this little thing. And we're like, right? Yeah. Like, isn't that weird? Like, why does she have to go tell an old man about that?
Yeah.
So just knowing what the way she talks about the church and her friends and stuff, we know she gets it. And that's why we feel like, okay, we can trust her to go in these situations, knowing and having all the information.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So let's finish with, let's see, what about relationships? Were there any relationships that were strong when you were in the church that you feel like you had to like let that go? It's no longer the same.
Yeah, definitely. And this might kind of fall into that category of like me projecting my own like inner thoughts on, the way people perceive me and those relationships. But, like my relationship with my in-laws has changed drastically. And I actually, you know what, within like the last 6 months, I feel like I'm finally getting back to that place where I was before we left the church. Because so like when Mike and I first started dating, like they were my second family. Like we were over there all the time, like almost every day, every single Sunday, we'd have dinner over there. And I, call all of his siblings, my brothers, my sisters, I call his parents, my mom and dad. Like I called his parents mom and dad before we were even engaged. Like they're my family. So, going through that transition of the church, being in the church, it's not just a Sunday commitment, it's a lifestyle. And so anytime we would get together with them, that's, that commands the conversation. That's a lot of what they talk about. It's like, if you haven't seen them in a month, it's like, oh, how's your calling going? How's so-and-so in Young Women's, or, this, that, and the other. And then all of a sudden it's like, you not only are not able to participate in that conversation, you don't even want to hear it. It's like, I don't even want to be in the room listening to this go on. So that made it really difficult to want to even be, in family gatherings for a long time. And I think they have done a really great job of, whether they've been conscientious of it or not, or I've changed my own mindset when we've gone, to be with them in the last several months, but it's just, that's not commanding the conversation quite as much. And, we're able to, have conversations, around other things and make new connections and, basically just, kind of like hitting reset and like making new memories and just paving a new way forward and, remending the lost time that we had. And, COVID kind of probably played a part in that too, because everybody got really hermity during that time. You just went into your little cave and you couldn't see anybody. And then all of a sudden for me, it was just like, yeah, this faith transition was a huge part of my life. But at the end of the day, I don't know what's going to happen when I die. And all I have is now. Like, when my family is gone, they're gone. And I'm not going to waste any more time like being caught up in like, what if a church thing comes up in conversation? Like, it's more important for me to be with those people because I love them and they've always supported me, otherwise. And I want to be with them. So yeah, my in-laws, that was really hard for me. And then like the group of friends that I had that I felt like were like, I'm sure you and many others can relate. Like you have this group of friends, like in your ward and in your neighborhood when you leave the church, and maybe not everybody can relate to this, but I feel like I had a really close group of friends. Like we had a bunco group, we'd go on vacations together, like date nights, we'd have birthday parties and barbecues. And it's just like, at the time, it just felt like this long lasting friendships that would never end. And then starting to go through a faith transition and like, barreling down this rabbit hole, and you don't go to church for several months. And then it's like, nobody's even noticed that I'm gone. Nobody's asked me if I'm okay. And then, I remember one specific time I decided to be brave and very, softly bring up the gospel topics essays, which I did not think, as far as like topics go of controversy, it's on the church website, so it's pretty soft.
Yeah.
But one of the girls in our friends group, she shut me down so hard. And it just, all of a sudden, it just made me feel really unsafe to express what was going on internally with that whole faith transition, which just ultimately made me feel like I didn't belong in that group of friends anymore. And when we moved from our home, 2.5 years ago up to our, from Spanish Fork up here to South Jordan, because of my husband's job, I did have a couple of those girls reach out to me, because we, posted pretty loudly about our transition out of the church at that time, and just say, I knew you were going through something, and it doesn't matter to me where you spend your Sundays. Like, I love you, and, we'll always be friends. And, I do appreciate those messages and those ladies. But, for me, at the end of the day, it's kind of like the damage was done. And, we're on totally different pages. And it's just, I can look back at those friendships, and it's kind of like in Buddhism, the parable of the raft, where, you're stranded on this and on this island, and you put all this time and effort and energy and, money and momentum into this raft to get you off of this island. And you finally get off the island. And then when you get to where you're going, you can't take that raft anymore, which is your friendships. Like it's painful, it hurts, and you need to let it go. And as hard as it is to say goodbye to the raft, you can't be mad at the raft for not needing it anymore. So it's just, there's a time and a season for all things. And as much as it hurts to, have friendships come and go in your life, it's just, I think that's in some friendships, I think that's just kind of how life goes. But the plus side of that is I have made some amazing friendships since leaving the church. And, some of these friendships are, without those people, I don't know how I would have ever gotten through what I went through. So
I know what you mean. Yeah. It's like, it's hard to accept that part of life. And I think we sometimes want to bottle it up and believe that it's only within Mormonism and leaving Mormonism, but it's like, no, like this happens throughout our entire lives. We're always going to have to accept change and, like death, or even just something that feels like a death, like losing relationships. Even though they're still living, it feels like that person is gone. And it's something that none of us really want to embrace, but it's really like such an important part of our lives. And as long as we can accept that life is not static and we will always be changing. We're going to be cycling through different things, different seasons, and new friendships. Like, one thing I always have to remind myself, like, repetitively, is my favorite saying, that one door closes, another one opens. So it's like,
Yeah.
at least we have that hope that, okay, it's sad, like we're losing these friendships, but there's so much coming our way now. Like, let's be excited about the new friendships, the freedom now that we have to believe in whatever we want, the empathy that we've gained by going through that experience in Mormonism and feeling like we had all the answers, and the judgmental person that like wants to put ourselves above others. But now we have that experience and we've stepped out and we're like, oh my gosh, like, we know what it feels like to be there. We know what it feels like to lose a relationship. We know we have all this empathy now, and now we get to move into this new season of our lives. And instead of being sad for what was lost, of course, we need to grieve and experience it all, but also remember that something new is coming into our lives at every time that we lose something. It's always something new and exciting. And like, I loved how you expressed that about the friendships, because it's like you had such a great group of friends, but if you hadn't have had this experience and, had these same people kind of align at the same time and go through this experience at the same time, you wouldn't have all these new, amazing, really meaningful friendships and relationships that you have now, which is such a beautiful thing. So that's one thing that I think, if we can remember going through this, like, don't focus so much on what was lost, but know that something beautiful and is coming your way. If it hasn't come yet, if those new friendships haven't come yet, like, they will come once we finish up the grieving process, we fully let it go. And once we let that go, that's when the new friendships will come into your life. Because as long as we're stuck in that grief, we're never going to be open to seeing, that's what I think is funny. Sometimes we are so consumed with seeing what is lost, and there's all these people standing right there waiting for you. And like, you're like, I don't have any friends. I don't have any friends. And there's like people just waiting to be your friend. Yeah. But we can't see it because we're just looking over here,
Right.
Yeah. But thank you so much, Lindy. It's been so fun to catch up with you. I hope I got to see you last summer. I hope I get to see you again this summer. Because now I'm full-time in St. George, so I'm not up in Salt Lake as much, where we just put our house up for sale officially. And it's just, it's sad, bittersweet, but I love that we have Zoom. We can connect online, and hopefully you guys can come down to St. George and visit sometime.
Yes, we would love to.
Okay.
So much for having me. This was really fun. I enjoyed it. So
good. All right. Well, I'll see you soon and have a good day.
Yep. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Lindy. Bye.